Remember like the 80s and 90s?
Yeah.
When everything felt so new and rebellious? Well, we're going to tap into that energy today.
Yeah.
With a deep dive into countercultural festivals.
Definitely.
Think Burning Man, think Psytrance raves, all those kind of like underground movements that somehow still feel really relevant today.
Yeah, and we're not just reminiscing about like tie-dye and glow sticks.
Right.
We're going to unpack why these festivals, specifically Burning Man and that Psytrance scene, exploded in popularity, and what their lasting impact has been on, I think, culture in general.
Right. So let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Our guide for this deep dive is an academic book review.
Okay.
But don't worry, we'll keep things lively.
Okay.
It compares two books, one about Burning Man
Right.
and the other one about Psytrance gatherings across the globe. And what's so great about that is that it gives us these like multiple perspectives on what's actually driving these movements.
Yeah, what's so compelling is that both festivals, while unique in their expression,
Right.
they both tap into this like deep human need for ritual and belonging.
Yeah.
It's like they offer this temporary escape from the everyday, a chance to like rewrite the rules and connect with something bigger than yourself.
I am so hooked.
Yeah.
So the review dives into the history of Burning Man, right? From this small group of friends on a beach in '86 to this like massive phenomenon in the Nevada desert today.
Right.
It's kind of mind-boggling how it's evolved.
It is, and that evolution raises some fascinating questions.
Yeah?
The review talks about Burning Man's shift to a for-profit model in the late 90s, which was controversial, to say the least. Imagine pouring your heart into something like Burning Man,
Right.
only to see it become a business.
Yeah.
Would you feel betrayed?
Yeah.
Or would you see it as a necessary evolution to like manage that growth?
Right. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of like staying true to your roots when something blows up
Totally.
is a thread that runs through this whole review.
It does.
Especially with how Psytrance went global.
Absolutely. But before we dive into that, let's talk about the power of place.
Okay.
Both Burning Man and Psytrance events rely heavily on specific locations to create their unique atmosphere.
Okay, so I'm fascinated by this idea of desire mapping. Did the sources say how organizers actually choose these locations?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem random.
It's incredibly deliberate. The review describes desire mapping as this process of finding places that evoke very specific feelings that kind of amplify the experience they're trying to create.
Yeah.
Take Burning Man, for example.
Right.
That vast, empty canvas of the Nevada desert becomes this blank slate
It does?
for participants to project their own ideas of utopia onto.
Oh, wow.
It's really interesting.
So it's like the desert itself becomes part of the festival, almost like a participant?
Precisely.
Wow.
And with Psytrance, while often on a smaller scale, the location is equally crucial.
Okay.
Goa, India became this global hub for Psytrance in the 90s.
Right.
It wasn't just about the music, it was the vibe, the sense of freedom, the connection to nature.
Right.
All of it kind of meticulously curated to enhance that sense of escaping the everyday.
Which makes you wonder, how does a festival that's so carefully crafted around a specific experience maintain its underground credibility when it goes global?
Right.
Like, doesn't that curated escape become harder to achieve as more and more people buy into it?
It's a fascinating paradox.
It is.
And that's where the comparison to Burning Man gets really interesting.
Okay.
While Burning Man centralized in the Nevada desert, Psytrance remained more decentralized, a network of smaller scenes.
Okay.
Even though it went global, it's largely DIY,
Right.
which allows it to kind of hold on to that underground feel.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So we've got these two different models playing out.
We do.
Burning Man, this big centralized event,
Yeah.
and then Psytrance, more like a network of smaller gatherings.
Oh.
But both grappling with this tension of staying true to their countercultural roots while experiencing this explosive growth.
Totally.
I'm curious, does the review suggest which model is more successful at navigating that?
It's less about which model is more successful and more about how each festival grapples with the inherent tension of growth.
Okay.
The review argues that perhaps it's not about size or profit, but the intention behind the festival.
Right.
Burning Man, for all its scale, still emphasizes self-expression, participation, and gifting.
Right. It's not just a big-name music festival dropped in the desert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another crucial element that both festivals utilize. The power of ritual and performance.
Yeah. The review kept coming back to that.
Yeah.
Like, how do these temporary worlds become so immersive? and meaningful.
Right.
How do they actually work?
Well, with Burning Man, it's incredibly intentional.
Okay.
The creation and burning of the man itself,
Right.
the elaborate costumes, the art cars, the performances.
Yeah.
It's all deeply ritualistic.
And it's about participation, right?
Yes.
You're not just watching a show at Burning Man, you are the show.
Precisely.
Right.
But where Burning Man relies on structured ritual,
Okay.
Psytrance leans more into spontaneity.
Okay.
It's about the collective energy of the dance floor,
Okay.
facilitated by the music, and yes, often by certain, shall we say, entheogens, as the kids call them these days.
Okay, so maybe not your grandma's church social then.
Right.
But there's still that sense of like collective experience,
Yeah.
of tapping into something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And the review uses this term, it's a bit of a mouthful, hyperliminality.
Ah, yes, hyperliminality.
Yeah.
So imagine liminality,
Right.
that in-between state
Okay.
where normal rules don't apply.
Okay.
Think rites of passage carnivals, those
Right.
moments of transition.
Yeah.
Hyperliminality takes that concept further,
Okay.
pushing those boundaries to create intensely immersive, disorienting experiences.
Wow.
It can really shake up your sense of self.
It's like that feeling you get at a really good concert, where you totally lose yourself in the music and everything else just kind of fades away,
Exactly.
but like amplified to the max.
Exactly.
And this is something that Psytrance is intentionally cultivating.
Absolutely.
Wow.
The pulsating music, the visuals, the collective dancing, they all work together to create this hyperliminal state.
Okay.
The review suggests it's not just about escapism.
Right.
It can be a way to find new perspectives,
Okay.
to challenge social norms, to connect with something beyond the everyday.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So both Burning Man and Psytrance create these experiences,
I do.
but in totally different ways.
Yeah. Yes.
Burning Man, with its structured rituals,
Right.
is almost like building your own, like, temporary society.
Right.
Whereas Psytrance is more about surrendering to the moment,
Yes.
to that collective energy.
And both approaches offer this potent cocktail of freedom and belonging,
Yeah,
something that's increasingly hard to find in our modern world,
totally.
which I think speaks to why these festivals continue to resonate with people,
Right.
even if they've never been to one.
Okay, so I'm totally with you. But here's the million-dollar question.
Okay.
If these countercultural spaces are fulfilling such a deep need for
Right.
ritual and connection,
Yeah,
what does that say about our mainstream culture?
that's a great question.
Why are so many people seeking this kind of experience
Yeah.
outside of their everyday lives? It's almost like these festivals are like holding up a mirror
Yeah.
to our own lives.
That's totally.
They're showing us this hunger for something more,
Yeah.
something authentic and meaningful
Right.
that maybe we're missing
Yeah,
in our everyday routines.
that's a really powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of why this deep dive matters.
Okay.
Even if you've never set foot on the playa or danced under the desert stars. It's about recognizing this, like, fundamental human need to connect, to belong, to experience something beyond the ordinary.
And it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Both Burning Man and Psytrance emerged in the 80s and 90s,
Right,
just as the internet was taking off.
totally.
So you have this like parallel development happening.
Yeah.
Technology is connecting us in all these new ways,
Right.
but also maybe it's fueling this yearning for something more,
Right.
like a more embodied in-person kind of experience.
What's fascinating is that those early ravers and burners were onto something.
Right.
They anticipated this need for authentic connections that's only become more pronounced in our hyper-connected yet often isolating digital age.
Okay, so where does that leave us?
Yeah.
What can we learn from these like seemingly niche
Yeah.
festivals and actually apply to our own lives, even if we're not about to like jet off to the desert or a rave?
Right, you don't have to don a neon costume or a spinfire to tap into that sense of community ritual, even hyperliminality.
Right.
It's about being more intentional with the experiences that we choose.
Okay.
Ones that push us outside our comfort zones.
Right.
That foster connection.
Okay.
And spark a sense of wonder.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah,
So it's less about like the where and more about the how.
exactly.
Instead of seeking out this prepackaged experience,
Yes.
it's about creating those moments of meaning and connection
Totally.
in our own lives.
Exactly, whether it's joining a local group
Yeah.
that aligns with your passions,
Okay.
maybe exploring a new creative outlet,
Right.
or simply being more present in the everyday.
Yeah.
You know, finding joy in the simple act of like sharing a meal with loved ones
Yeah.
or marveling at a sunset.
Right.
It's about cultivating those rituals, those connections that remind us we're part of something larger than ourselves.
So after diving deep into these countercultural movements, we're left with a question that's both personal and universal.
Okay.
How do we create those spaces for meaning and connection in our own lives?
It's a big question.
What rituals, communities, or experiences allow us to tap into that sense of belonging and wonder that we've been exploring?
Exactly.
That's something worth